study on ALC201.
They accompany things that are like there, and you know, you've got things like skeletons and things like that relating to animals and all sorts of things, but there's the digital media aspect of that where they have like an expert talking on a screen which you can press play, and there's that accompanying actual exhibits.
The last one I went to was Science Works, and that was kind of, it's interactive but not in the way that we would perceive as interactive anymore, because that was all just like pulleys and stuff like that.
One of the main risks would be that it would take away from the authenticity of an experience of going to a museum if everything was completely digital, or the majority of it was digital. It would sort of just take away from that sort of classic experience of being able to look at and interact with different displays and things like that.
Being able to touch a fossil with a dinosaur.
Something as simple as that can just be quite valuable if you're talking about a museum rather than being confronted with a screen. It's more like a documentary, really, isn't it?
When you think of a museum, you want to see and you want to be able to maybe touch, even if a sign tells you you're not allowed to touch the dinosaur fossils, you may want to do that. What's the potential danger of bringing in more and more digital screen interactive media?
I think there's a risk that it's just going to end up being like a physical place that you go to use the internet. Where you could have done that from home, check it out on Wikipedia. So I think it's perhaps there's a danger there when you take out the more tactile elements of a museum, the more real life elements of a museum, where it does just become like an internet access point.
Hi everyone, I'm talking to you today from the Deakin University Melbourne Burwood campus. I'm sitting on my own here in a quiet, empty seminar room, just doing some audio recording while I'm in between meetings. And I actually didn't want to put myself on screen this week. One, to make the point that you can make a video without putting yourself on screen, but also to use some of the footage I took about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I went to Melbourne's Immigration Museum, a fantastic little museum on Flinders Street, and I highly encourage you to go there at some point, even over the summer once the unit's done. It's got some great uses of interactive screen media there. And I wanted to make sure I used that footage in relation to this topic. But before I jump into the topic for this week, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about assessment. And I'm sure you're pretty keen to hear a little bit more about that. Firstly, obviously, the Module 1 exercise has been released, all the grades and feedback. Congratulations on the fantastic effort that were put into so many of those. People should really be proud of a lot of the work that they've done. You've captured the critical creative nexus that this unit, that assignment, and really the whole unit is all about. So it's really great to see. Some people do need to put in a bit more time and effort, so please do make sure you make a start on the Module 2 exercise as soon as possible. If you have not already, as I've been saying, you are behind. This is more complex than it probably sounds. And I was actually thinking, leading up to filming this video, that I was going to give some general feedback on the Module 1 exercise. But Lara, Neil and I have been really detailed in our comments on individual assignments, and I thought that's probably not absolutely essential in the first place. But the more I thought about what feedback would I give on the last exercise, the more it just turned into more advice that I could give in relation to the next exercise in making your video. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about some general advice. It may even repeat some advice I've talked about elsewhere, but I will put these under some headings so it's a bit clearer. Do make sure you take some notes. Demonstrate reading and research. It's really important that you explicitly refer to your sources in your video. You don't even have to cite them, quote them and cite them in your written reflection in your blog post. Make sure you read the instructions really carefully in relation to this. Your video must show your engagement, your explicit engagement with your sources, and I've showed a lot of different ways in which this could be done through the meLectures. If you're reading out a quotation, for example, you could say quote or unquote, or you could even have the quotation in a caption or on a slide that you've screenshot. So there's lots of different ways, and you don't have to necessarily quote a source to use it. You can actually explain an argument or draw a point in different ways. There are many ways you can present your engagement with your research. And note the bare minimum, and note that it also is the bare minimum in terms of the sources that you use. Above all, use your sources effectively. Show that you've read them, that you've engaged with them, that you've critiqued them, that you've applied them to your example, and that you've related them to your analysis. Also, make sure your referencing is perfect at this stage. We need to expect this at second year level, and it's easy marks that you don't want to lose. Demonstrate creativity and independence of thought. You'll notice that some of these headings that I'm using are actually pretty much replicating the assessment criteria. With this one, make sure your focus, your analysis, and your presentational strategies are original. Being creative doesn't inherently mean entertaining us. A lot of students in the past have said, do we have to be funny? Well, that's one. Humour is only one of many creative strategies, and do what you're comfortable with. Creativity doesn't necessarily mean being funny. Using an opening title instead of just skipping straight to a talking head, for instance, is creative. It's good filmmaking. Plan your video. Use scripts and or storyboards to plan your video, to design what you're going to do. I've seen some really great things done in some seminar exercises recently with storyboards, and I can't draw very well, and I'll admit I have never drawn a storyboard for any of the videos that I've made, but I quite often at least make a summary, if not a script, and the script does not have to be word for word in what you say, and it can even be more effective if you're not reading out word for word and you haven't memorised word for word what you're saying, but you need to be prepared. You need to have a good idea of what you're going to do before you come to make the final product. Get quality footage. We don't expect professional work that's fit for HBO here, but make sure you take into account background noise, lighting, and so on. You'll notice that in a lot of the videos I've made in previous years, the lighting is not fantastic, and when I sit in my games room now and I film myself talking to the camera, I've actually started to use something as simple as basically a desk lamp. If shooting with a phone, hold the phone horizontally. You've probably seen a lot of Facebook videos which are actually quite narrow in their footage because people seem to instinctively hold the phone upright instead of horizontally when they're taking video. And speak to the camera if you're on screen talking to the audience. You don't have to be, but notice the difference between someone who is reading notes even slightly up to the side of a camera, and you'll know that it's a pretty big difference. Take care with editing. Practice early if you haven't done this before, and take care with editing. Practice early if you haven't done this before, and leave a lot of time for it, particularly if you're using a new program that might be different to one you've used before. Another tip that I'd give is don't move video and audio files, your raw footage, around on your computer after you've started editing. Your editing program will forget where it is, and it's quite annoying to have to go back and find the material. It doesn't happen very often, but if you do that, it can be quite frustrating. So make sure you kind of get all your footage into a folder and then start to do the editing. Use material appropriately. I can't stress this enough. I don't want to repeat the details here, but make sure you reread the instructions on this issue. Remember that you can always make your own images to show off your creative skills. And if necessary, make it clear to us that they are yours. If you've made music even, make it clear that you've made the music. Provide signed consent forms for anyone identified. Make up your own brief form that states what the material is for and where it will be published. Don't stress about the wording so much. It's just good to get into the practice of doing this, which certainly is what organisations do in industries. Upload the signed forms in individual files to the Dropbox. Start early, try things out, and test things out. Experiment with different approaches to see what works. Try making a 30-second video and upload it just to ensure everything's hunky-dory. It's often quite quick to use digital media, but consider how long you would, could, or should spend on a 1,600-word essay to get a high mark. You'll probably find you'll spend more time on a video. Check your work against the instructions and assessment criteria before submitting. I'll let this image speak for itself. This relates to all video, audio, images, everything you've written, etc. Things happen and they can be incredibly frustrating when you've put so much time and effort into it. So make sure you keep regular backups. Good luck.